All right. Peace and shalom, family. Peace and shalom. This is your brother Divine Prospect of Kingdom Harbinger Ministries back in the building with another Freestyle Friday. What's going on, family? I know you ain't seen my face in almost 2 weeks. I think almost 2 weeks, but we back. The times that you don't see me, things are coming up. There's things that I'm doing, taking care of, business-wise, family-wise, work-wise, ministry-wise, etc. This week, we've been having some issues mobile-wise as far as having to get a car repaired and some other challenges that's come up. There's a lot of things we kind of juggling around, trying to take care of. Work is increasing because, the contract that I have, the company wants to help and get all this work done before the holidays. You know what I'm saying? So it's been a little bit more of a demand, more than usual. But nonetheless, we here. You know what I'm saying? We in the building. All right. Got some interesting things to share with you guys. And definitely want to get started. So we can give a few seconds for some more people to join on in. Few seconds for more of y'all to join on in. Few more seconds. Let's see. All right. Okay, so I'm going to say peace and shalom. Let me see what we got in. We have Keenan Clayton Jr. Shalom. Ben Haya Shalom. Mr. ACS Shalom. Dimitri Little Shalom. What's going on, family? What's going on? Okay. All right. So let me get started with a couple of things. I got a couple of house cleaning things to get out the way. Then we'll answer a couple of questions as usual, and we'll close out our Freestyle Friday. We'll see how epic we can get it today with the time that is allotted to us, which is about an hour. And we'll go from there. So let me go ahead and get started. So peace and shalom, family. Again, thank you for joining us. Welcome. If you're brand new, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can subscribe to the channel. You get notifications whenever we go live or whenever we upload videos or whenever we do a premiere. So make sure you click that subscribe button, hit the bell, hit all, so you can get all the notifications as they are owed to you. All right. With that said, also, if you enjoy the content, hit the thumbs up on the channel, hit the thumbs up. If you want to support, you can do so via clicking in the chat, and you could do a super chat, you could do a super sticker, and or the other methods of supporting the ministry is going to be in the description below. Okay, we appreciate everything you send to us. I want to give a quick shout out to R Hall. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it. Shout out to Aaron, who just recently signed up to our Patreon. I know he's been around these parts for some time. Now he locked in with us. And shout out to all the Patreon members and KHM members as well. We appreciate y'all. Thank you for your support. You make things possible as it is viewed here on this YouTube channel with the works that we do online, as well as the works we do behind the scenes. It cannot be possible without the support for my KHM members, our Patreon members, and our viewers that are watching this channel. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate that. All right. So there's a lot of things, not a lot of things, a couple of things we're going to bring out. Shout out to Brother Hassad in the building. Shalom. Shout out to NHIT Nazarene Hebrew Institute in the building. Shalom. Apothecary Custom in the building. Shalom. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate that. Make sure you share the video. Hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you're brand new, hit the subscribe button and lock in with us. All right. So again, if you don't see content like live streams on here, there's other videos we upload. Like I just put up a Clubhouse video. I premiered it, 2 days ago, I believe, on here. There's also another Clubhouse session that is on Patreon that you can check out. And I'm uploading another Clubhouse session at the end of this session tonight. And I'm putting it on the Patreon, so it'll be there as well. However, there is a gem on Patreon I want y'all to check out, a gem. All right. So there's a couple of things I got to get out the way. First thing is I'm going to show you one of the things that I'm still working on. I'm not done yet, but I'm working on it, making a lot of headway, a lot of progress. That's something that I told y'all that I will be releasing on this channel about a month or two ago, probably 2 months ago. That I told you I will be releasing soon. I will share some of it with you on this channel, but you got to go to the Patreon, because when you go to the Patreon, that's the best way to support this project. So that way it can go from conception to completion, right? This is going to greatly empower the community. And this is going to provide that academic engine, right? That keeps us running, keeps us moving to authenticate and validate these heritage claims that we make. Okay. So let me go ahead and show y'all what it is that I'm talking about. I'm gonna go over a initiative in regards to this and why this is necessary and important, and why y'all need to support this, because I mean, we don't have nothing like this, speaking from our academic voice, that is published and can be cited and are quoted when we have discussions, debates, etc. This is the fuel that we need when we get into these circles to discuss any heritage claims or authenticity claims to us being Israelites, right? And this is referring to the Israelites in regards to Western Central Africa, because that is where my focus is at and my expertise is at. Now, the Israelites that we talk about that is here amongst the indigenous population in America, that is not my area of expertise. I can speak on it, but it's not my area of expertise. So if I write something on it, it's going to be secondhand. It's not going to be with me actually diving into the populace who make these claims and having connects there and joining a society that deals with that has a corpus of works in this field, etc. So I'll be speaking about that as a spectator, right, as opposed to this particular bracket in which I'm intimately involved. All right. So I'm going to pull this up so you can take a look at it and see what I'm talking about. And yeah. So this is it right here. It's called Eisodus to African Zion: Polycentric Migrations, Ritual Residuals, and the Limits of Genetic Essentialism in African Judaic Research. All right. So this is a monograph that I will get published next year with ISSAJ after they peer review it. We'll see how that goes, because this is going to combat a lot of the arguments that I feel are, I'm not going to say weak, that I feel are plagued or riddled with gaps, right? And because those gaps exist, they're typically glossed over and conclusions are made hastily. But this actually is going to fill in those gaps, right? And you're going to say, Devon, what the heck is you talking about, right? I'm going to show you 1 second. So as you can see here, Eisodus, Exodus means you're here and you're leaving out. Eisodus means you're here and you're going back in. So we know we had Israelites leaving from Egypt and going into the Levant. But we also know there was an Eisodus from the Levant back into Egypt, right? We see this occurring also in the book of Jeremiah, where the Judites in the south were being wicked, and the Most High said, nah, y'all got to get your butt whooped, belt to, and told them, stay here and get this whooping by the Babylonians. And them ninjas like, nah, we out of here. So then they tried to leave out the Levant, enter into Egypt. And the Most High said, okay, you're going to Egypt, and you ain't going to escape me in Egypt. I'm going to judge Egypt too if you go there. But some of them did make it to Egypt. But even after, right before the siege of Babylon, when the Assyrian siege, you had a lot of northern tribe individuals go into Judah, and then from Judah go into Egypt. And we find an encampment of them on Elephantine Island during the Persian period, right? But what I'm showcasing is that we had Eisodus, multiple Eisodus into Africa. The last one we would say is the one from 70 CE. That was the last one I went into Africa. However, what we call the 10 lost tribes of Israel, the northern tribes, were already in Africa. Way before Judah entered into Africa, they were already in Africa, already transmigrating all throughout Africa, right? So this is extremely important, because when we get into these circles to authenticate and validate our heritage claims and our authenticity of lineal descent, in regards to Jews, we have to connect ourselves to the Black Jews of West and Central Africa, South Africa, East Africa, right? Now, North Africa, it's a totally different set of Jews, but in the sub-Saharan region where we come from, we have to authenticate that premise. And polycentric migrations means that there was not just one group that came in at one particular time in history of Israelites into Africa. It was multiple migrations at different times based on different circumstances, and they're migrating into different regions. However, over time, these groups become centralized. That's why we say poly, multi-centric. They centralized and started to set up shops, set up communities, et cetera, right? And the limits of genetic essentialism. Well, what is a genetic essentialism? Well, that deals with the fact that there are those who dismiss our claims of Israelites based on genetic research and say, hey, the real Jews is J1, J2. The real Jews is R1A or whatever else. You're not that, so you're not Jews. And then you got the E1, B1B, E1, B1A. Well, both of those are not considered Jewish lineal descent lines of haplogroups. So they say, oh, so we're going to dismiss you outright and altogether. Any claims you made of being authentic Israelites or Jews, we're going to dismiss it. Well, that's not how you do holistic research. And what we're going to do with this work is we're going to address those things directly. All right. I give you maps, migration routes, oral traditions, ritual residuals. Well, the Israelites that's coming in from the Levant, especially the northern tribes who are coming in, they're not coming in with no Tanakh. They're not coming in, obviously, with no Talmud. They're not coming in with no Apocrypha. They're not coming in with no pseudepigrapha work. They're not coming in with that stuff. They're coming in with their customs, their minhag, their customs. They're coming in with rituals. They're coming in with traditions. They're coming with everything that they would have understood from the Torah. The lived Torah is what is following them as they come in. Now, if there were scribes amongst them, which, you know, we have some attributions of scribes amongst them, they would have had some text. It would have obviously contained some portions of what we have in the Torah today, but it would be slightly different because what we have today is highly redacted. They would have had a more original form of it, which some people call the Elohist, and they moved into Africa. Again, so how do we determine who they are? Well, you got to look at the customs. You got to look at the traditions, whether they're oral traditions, which are mostly going to be, or lived traditions, their material culture, their material religion. When you see these ethnic markers, follow them. You know exactly where those Jews left from out of Levant, migrated into Africa, right? First stop is Egypt, then going south from Egypt until you get to Nubia, and then further all the way south till you get to what's called Ethiopia. And before you get all the way south to Ethiopia, there's a sub-Saharan migration route that they take going across until they enter into West Africa and then scale down into Central West Africa. And then the ones in the east scale all the way down till you get to South Africa. So these are multiple migrations that's happening. How do we follow them? Based on their practices. When the Beta Israel was discovered in Ethiopia, they had still first century or first temple practices that does not follow what we have in the Talmud, what we have in the Midrash. They didn't have any of those customs and practices. Remember, the Pharisees came about during the Grecian occupancy of Judea. Okay. That's when we get, after the Maccabean revolt, that's when we get the rise of the Pharisees. They didn't exist prior to that. But the Pharisees are part of the pre-rabbinic movement. So a lot of the rabbinic movement owes its beginnings with the Pharisaic group. So when these groups from the north had already left and went into Africa, you're not going to find these traces with them. So if somebody's looking for Jews in Africa coming directly from the Levant, you're looking at the wrong time period. It's not going to be after 500 CE when the Talmud was completed. These are not people who are highly specialized scribes that are bringing the Talmud in there with them, bringing all of these second temple oral traditions in there with them. remember, my stance in regards to the oral tradition as it stands today is that the oral tradition that stands today comes from the Persian period, does not go back to Sinai. And that's a discussion that me and my brother Zion Lex are going to have at some time in the future. Does not go back to Sinai. So what comes down from Sinai all the way up until the destruction of that first temple, when those Assyrians who are still in the land, right? The northern tribes are still in the land, were sieged by the Assyrians in 721 BCE, right? And then 701, the Assyrians moved forward 20 years later and seized Lachish. All those individuals impacted by that, not the ones that are brought further east, but the ones that leave into Judah. And we see that because when we have the ecumenical Passovers that we see from Hezekiah and Josiah trying to bring everybody together, there's still a remnant that's still in the north that's being sought after by couriers to bring them to the south to have this ecumenical Passover. They're migrating to the south, and then eventually they migrate from the south into Africa, where the ones that's from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, they stay central to Jerusalem, in and around Jerusalem in that region until their siege, and then they're brought into Babylon, right? A few of them escape into Africa, but the majority of them is either brought into Babylon or the poor are left in the land. They return and come back. You have some Samaritans are still in there. You have this whole group of Jews coming back from Judah. You got the Zadokite line from Levi, etc. That's coming back in there, and they're settling there. They don't get dispersed from there until after 70 CE. But at that time, all of them didn't go into Africa. A portion of them went into Africa. After the Third Jewish-Roman War, and after the Council of Hillel II, that's when those majority of Judites go and enter into Africa to escape further persecution. But some also move operations from Tiberias and Yavne all the way then further into Babylon to escape further persecution. And this is how we get the closing of the Talmud in 500 CE. So when we're looking at these individuals that are in Africa, they're not going to have these Talmudic understandings. They're not going to have this oral tradition understandings that start at the Persian captivity if they was already in the land prior to that. So if you're looking for that as an ethno marker to distinguish these Black Jews in Africa, you have looking lens. So remember, to identify this, we have to look differently. But what happens is academia, the academic hegemony that runs African Judaic research, they're not looking through things through this lens. Okay, they're looking for Talmudic traditions, oral traditions, everything that is Second Temple and beyond. When the majority of the ones that went into Africa are from the northern tribes, and they were in there prior to Persian captivity. So you have to look for something completely different. So you're gonna have to find it in the customs and the rituals and the practices and the oral traditions, the migration routes and things that line up with that, the acculturation, culture fusion, and enculturation process that occurs when they're coming in there. See, Torah is all about a theocracy in a land. The land is very important in order to establish this theocracy or the Torah that was given to the Israelites. Case in point, when the Israelites have Passover in the land, what follows after Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Why? That's because you had an abundance of barley and wheat. These are what we call first fruit crops, right? The seasonal crops that one reaps in order to have sustenance over time. Okay, this is very important. All right. Chef, I'm sure you do disagree with that, but I actually have a work on that. So I'll drop that link in the chat and y'all can take a look at it, okay? Shout out to Ken P. Thank you so much for the donation, my brother. Shalom to you as well. All right. So that's the crop that grows during the springtime. Well, if we're going to look for Jews that is in Africa, we got to look for groups that have these springtime crops, that gather these springtime crops, and what the procedure is once they get it. What policy are they following? What procedure are they following? What ritual are they following? Then Sabbath observances, 8th day circumcision, all of these things are genetic markers. Excuse me. I'm not going to say genetic markers, obviously, because they're external, but all of these are external markers to determine that these are vestiges of the practices and customs of the Israelites who have merged in with these indigenous groups. So in this paper, I go into detail about it. The monograph is like 120 pages, but the book is going to be over 250 pages. It's going to be jam-packed. All right. It's going to be a monumental work. But I pray that I finish this work in my lifetime and I don't expire prior to that, because once this work is done and we get it published and it's in the academic space, I'm opening up the floodgates for y'all to come on in and create better works behind it. Not just YouTube videos, not just teachings and lectures, actual published material of who we are from our own voice. All praises to the Most High for that. But let me go over this initiative with y'all real quick. All right. Let me go over the initiative with y'all real quick, and we're going to move on. All right. Let's go through this. Why does this work matter? Now more than ever. For centuries, the histories, voices, and cultural memories of African Jewish communities. You're going to say, Devon, why are you using the word Jewish? Because this is an appeal to the academic terminology of these groups. If I say something foreign to them, they'll easily dismiss it. So I got to use the terminology that they use to relate the material to them so they can understand the niche that we are working through. From the Niger Basin to Ethiopia, from Luango to Igbo land, have remained hidden beneath the weight of colonial narratives, racial bias, and academic neglect. Although countless Africans carry rituals, names, migration stories, and spiritual traditions that echoed ancient Israel, their testimonies were dismissed, not because evidence was lacking, but because the world refused to see them. Today, new discoveries are transforming that landscape. Rediscovered journals from the 1700s and 1800s, African oral histories, archaeological findings, and long ignored ethnographic accounts now reveal a truth that generations of Africans have always known. The African Jewish identity has deep indigenous pre-colonial roots. These traditions were not invented, they were inherited. They survived through ritual, memory, and community, even in the face of enslavement, displacement, and forced assimilation. Yet, despite this growing body of evidence, many African descendant communities continue to face skepticism, marginalization, and institutional barriers when asserting their heritage. This results in erasure of identity, erasure of dignity, and erasure of historical truth. This project exists to change that. The Eisodus, the African Zion Initiative, is committed to uncovering, preserving, and restoring the histories of African Jewish communities using rigorous scholarship and accessible storytelling. By combining historical records, oral traditions, linguistic research, migration studies, and cultural anthropology, this work provides a comprehensive and groundbreaking view of African Judaic heritage, one that honors the past while empowering future generations. We need this work because communities deserve to see themselves accurately representing in history. Young Africans and African descendant people should inherit a narrative rooted in dignity, continuity, and ancestral strength. Faith communities require resources that validate lived traditions and shared memory. Scholars, educators, and leaders need credible research that challenges outdated assumptions and expands global understanding of Judaism's diverse history. Healing cannot occur without truth, and the truth cannot flourish without visibility. This is more than a historical project. It is a cultural restoration, an act of justice, and an opportunity to reconnect scattered histories across continents and centuries. We invite partners, institutions, donors, educators, and community members to join us in this historic effort. Together, we can bring these stories from the margins to the center, ensuring they are preserved, taught, celebrated, and recognized with the respect that they have always deserved. African Jewry or Jewry history is world history. Its recovery is our shared responsibility, and the time to act is right now. This is not a game. This is not a joke. The foundation on which we stand on in order for us outside of scripture to authenticate who we are rides on research like this that gets published. Okay. Okay. All right. All praise to the Most High. I don't think some of y'all even understand how deep this is and why this is important. Like the brother says there, Benya says, we owe it to our descendants. I agree, my brother. I did a whole session on YouTube talking about why we had to get into the academic space, why we had to tell our own story. Y'all getting resources from other ethnic groups that don't have the same lived and shared experience as us, and we're citing them. Well, what about citing ourselves? What about us telling our story? Okay. I think some people don't understand. It's okay. But the ones that do understand and understand how important and monumental this work is, I appreciate y'all's support. You can go to the Patreon, and I have a preview on the Patreon. I have the preface, the introduction, and chapter 3. Chapter 3 follows the migration routes. So take some time, read it, absorb it, and support the efforts. You can donate through the means in the description below, through Super Sticker, Super Chat. You can donate through the link for Square. All that money will go to the R&D because I'm not doing this completely by myself. I'm laying out the blueprint, and then I'm doing firsthand groundwork to get information from others, living sources, to add to this project until we have 250 plus pages of information, pictures, graphs, maps, and everything else. Right now, I do have some stuff that I've conjured up, but I want stuff from the actual primary sources themselves, which resides in Africa and the gatekeepers at ISSAJ, the International Society for the Study of African Jewry. Those are the gatekeepers for this information. I have to publish this. Once I get them to publish this, then I open up the floodgates for us. All praises. All praise, all praise. Okay. Let's fall back. Doing too much, divine. Doing too much. All right. But yeah, so check it out. It's on the Patreon. Sign up for the Patreon. Subscribe to the Patreon, www.patreon.com/Divine Prospect. The link is in the description below. Sign up for the Patreon. Go and check out Eisodus to African Zion. It's a sneak peek preview. Take a look at it. Understand why it's being put together. And once this is published, there will no longer be any doubt to our authentic claims of Israelite heritage, lineal descent, and identity. All praises to the Most High. Okay. All right. Now, while you're there on Patreon, there's new content. Surrounding this, I've also put various books on this subject matter from the opponents to this. So they are objectifying the authenticity of African Jewry, and they are dissecting it through the means of Judaism today, and that is error. Judaism today does not represent these groups that practice Torah in the mainland. You also have the issue of crypto Jews. This also talks about the Jews that migrated to West and Central Africa and disappear. These colonies, communities disappear after the transatlantic slave trade. And then we show how this is veiled by these groups as they get on the ships and been brought over to America. We're going into that type of information. We're showing you how to identify these things because this seems to be the history that they don't want to publish. It's no secret as to why. This undermines how Judaism today identifies authentic Israelite descent. We have been removed from that franchise. But now we have the research to put ourselves back. All praises. All praises. But yes, if you go on there, I have other works on there. Let me see. Let me see if I go through it real quick so you can see what some of these works are. Right? We have one called the Beta Israel, Ethiopia, and Israel Studies on the Ethiopian Jews, edited by Tudor Parfit and Emanuela Trevisan Semi. That's on there. I have a couple of maps on there as well from ISSAJ. I have a book called The Sabbath in the Old Testament and in the Intertestamental Period. Great book if you want research on the Sabbath, right? I also put a couple of other sources on there. Let me see what else is the other one that I added to that one. I have another book on there called Targums and Rabbinic Literature. This is extremely important so you can see that gap between the Targums, that tradition, oral tradition on the Targums go back to the Persian period, and how that connects to the rabbinic literature, and how a lot of rabbinic literature depends on the Targum, which is very important. So that's on there as well. And then I have another book called Becoming Jewish, New Jews and Emerging Jewish Communities in a Globalized World, edited by Tudor Parfit and Nathaniel Fisher. I also have African Zion. This is a book from 2013, Studies in Black Judaism, edited by Edith Bruder and Tudor Parfit. And New Children of Jerusalem, Emerging Jewish Communities in an Era of Globalization. The key thing that they're saying is these movements in Africa copies off of the Ashkenazim Jews. They get their identity from the Ashkenazim Jews. Either Christian missionaries taught this to them, that they're the Jews as a means to evangelize them, or you had Jewish rabbis come into Africa and just start converting, and or do the TV and the radio, these Africans who are being oppressed in Africa, they're hearing about these Jews, identifying with their plight, and then trying to convert as a means of getting empathy from these groups. We see this after the Biafran War in Igbo land. So they're saying that this is how y'all got this Jewish identity. We're saying, no, Israelites migrated in there, and we have all the primary sources to tell so. They say, no, these primary sources are not authentic, except that Tudor Parfit does authenticate the legend of the Luango Jews, even though he calls them some conversos and other things. But we have other individuals that talk about this stuff, right? They mention this. Janice Levy, she has a great paper talking about the sub-Saharan Jews, Black Jews, and about crypto Jews, meaning that on the outside, they practice the culture, customs, and religion of the land that they're in, but indoors, they maintain their Israelite identity, customs, practices, etc., worship of the Most High, Yah. So what I do in this book, I condense all that information from all these other sources. I do a gap analysis, look at the things that they miss, and say, no, we got to plug that in somewhere. There's an explanation for that, and we provide that background. All right, all praises. All right, so I wanted to get that out the way. Secondarily, those of you who are new to this channel or been around for some time, you know what KHM is about. And if you don't know what KHM is about, then I'm here to help you, because we are trying to implement the covenant social reconstruction model to let me see the best words, to establish autonomy in the Black community and alleviate a lot of the societal ills that we do experience in the community. So I'm going to just go down a statement of need for this covenant reconstruction model. It's on Patreon as well. You can look at the blueprint in my research paper on Patreon and look at the details of that. I've mentioned that on this channel before, but I'm going to tell you why this is important. And when you sign up for KHM, beginning next year in January, we're coming through with a clean slate. We're going to take this model, and the goal with KHM is to implement this model, because we've been talking about this for years. I never really got time to really lay out the specific details for the blueprint and the implementation steps for it, but I got it done. And now this is going to be the #1 priority of KHM in every city that KHM is in. So our current chapters and future chapters will be following this model in order for us to terraform our communities to look like the principles that Yah has given Israel to establish a theocracy in the land of Canaan when they exited out of Egypt. Because from our exodus out of slavery, we never had a covenantal law system that governs how we establish autonomy in America. We never had no institutions to remove the PTSD that we experienced. We got no reparations to build our own stuff. We used to be among our own selves and have our own stuff, but then we was destroyed, tortured, and we were discouraged from doing that. And then after all of that happened, then somebody dangled a carrot in front of us and said, hey, come over here and integrate. Come over here and integrate. Don't you want the stuff that white people have? Don't you want the stuff that we have over here? Dangling this carrots in front of us. Come on in on this side. And we had no plan coming on. And we think when we went over there, the grass is going to be greener, and we realized it's not. So what do we do now? Do we completely get off the grid and remove ourselves, rid ourselves of society? No. There is a way. I used to talk about this before. So segregation and integration, nah. Those were both tried and those fail. Aggregation, that is what works. You take elements of integration, elements of segregation, and you mold this middle ground and you shield and protect it. But there's a way, a philosophy that you got to go behind it in order to drive this thing to completion. And you need a rubric, a means of measurement to determine of success or failure. How do you stave off infiltration? Through transparency. Trust me, I took time to think tank this out. And let me show it to you real quick. I'll show it to you. So I'm going to show you what you're going to be looking for when you go to the Patreon and take a look at this. And then I'm going to read up for you the statement of need, and we're going to move on with the show. We got about 40 minutes. Let me go ahead and share this on the screen. All right, so you're going to be looking for this work on it, the Covenant Social Reconstruction Model, CSRM, converting ancient covenantal law into measurable reform policy for autonomy in the Black community. This is not a game. This is not a game. We're not playing with this. Right? Even if you look through the chapters, chapter 1, we're going to establish what it is, the core ethics, exegesis, covenant as social constitution, scholarship, identity, memory, and social obligation, diagnostic, fragmentation, and privatization in Black communities, CSRM implementation, covenant congresses, and charters. We go through all of that. Exegesis, the Shemitah and the Yovel as anti-entrenchment devices, scholarship and global justice, Jubilee as paradigm, diagnostic, Black land loss and debt carcerality. How do we deal with that? CSRM institutions, Jubilee funds, land trust, and Goshen land protocols, gleaning, tithes and welfare, labor, wages and cooperative work, commerce, finance, and just weights, courts, cities of refuge and Goshens, strangers, pan-diaspora, solidarity, and anti-xenophobia. How do we deal with those things? Right? Sabbath, rhythm, and restorative time, and CSRM as repertory nation building, Goshen's, refuges, and a new Black social contract. Y'all talking about nation building. Y'all ain't doing nation building. Y'all have a facade of nation building. Y'all not doing nation. This is nation building. So when you sign up with KHM, this is going to be our prerogative going into 2026. We're going to implement this system, right? This is the research paper. The monograph is 128 pages plus, all right? That is restored to get published somewhere so that we have that work here in case something happens to any one of us. This will be out there. You're going to say, well, Divine, if it's published and it's transparent, people know about this, wouldn't they try to infiltrate it? Aren't they going to try to shut it down? No. We have built-in contingencies to prevent that. Listen, you got to think about this stuff. This is why think tanks are important to have in our community. You got to think all this stuff out. You got to look at all the things that happened to the previous movements, how they failed, and how we can fill in those gaps and prevent those failures via contingencies. Okay. I know y'all just want to listen to debates and lectures and stuff like that. A lot of y'all, I be wondering if y'all live in reality. If y'all lived in reality, then you will understand that this is equally as valuable as that type of information that we learn. Equally as valuable. So let's go into the statement of need real quick. All right, I'm going to the statement of need. All right, let's address this. And then after this, we're going to move forward. All right, I'm going to throw the link in the chat if you want to sign up for KHM. Actually, go click on the link in the description if you want to sign up for KHM. This is what we're doing now. We're not playing no games, right? So let me give you a quick summary on what this is. What CRM is, the Covenant Social Reconstruction Model, is a governance blueprint for rebuilding Black communities using ancient covenantal law, especially Torah principles of justice, land, labor, and rest, translated into modern, measurable public policy. It's not a protest, not a church program, and not a nonprofit campaign. It is a constitutional model, a way for communities to govern themselves ethically, economically, and sustainably. Why is it needed? After 160 years since emancipation, we still don't control the structures that determine outcomes: land, courts, labor systems, and capital. We've been included in society, but not constitutionally empowered within it. The result is dependency without sovereignty and reform without permanence. Freedom without internal structure eventually collapses. Why previous attempts fell short? Here's the honest truth. Almost every Black Reconstruction effort failed for the same structural reasons, not because the people lacked vision. Past efforts, Reconstruction governance, Garveyism, Black Wall Street, civil rights organizations, Freedom Farms, the Black Panthers shared three fatal weaknesses. No permanent land law. Land was owned privately or informally, making it vulnerable to seizure, redlining, or destruction. 2, no internal judicial system. Justice depended on hostile external courts, policing, and political goodwill. And 3, dependence on external funding or permission. Once political wind shifted, support collapsed. These movements were morally right, but structurally exposed. CSRM learns from those failures instead of romanticizing them. Why current models still fail? Today's dominant approaches fall into 4 categories, and all of them stop short. Nonprofits, good at relief, bad at governance. Political advocacy, change laws, not structures. Black capitalism creates individuals, not communities. Faith movements inspire people, but don't legislate systems. None of these build internal constitutions. They manage symptoms, but don't control the architecture. What makes CSRM fundamentally different? CSRM is different because it does what no previous model has done at scale. It codifies law, not just vision. It institutionalizes land, not just ownership. It localizes justice, not just protest. It measures outcomes, not just intentions. CSRM introduces land trust so land can never be flipped or stolen. Gate court so justice happens inside the community. Storehouses so welfare is dignified and sustainable. Labor and rest code so people don't work themselves into sickness. And a data index so progress is transparent and auditable. This is not charity. This is statecraft at the community level. The big idea, CSRM is built on one core principle. Revelation becomes power only when it becomes policy. Ancient covenant law was never symbolic. It was infrastructure. When law, land, economy, and ethics align, autonomy stops being a dream and becomes a system. What CSRM is not anti-government, because you hear that rhetoric a lot. That's how you'll get shut down. Not anti-education. It's not anti-investment, because it's not separatist or extremist, because it's not dependent on federal rescue. It begins within existing law, but independent of failed systems. How people can get involved? CSRM needs builders, not just believers, scholars and students for research, policy, modeling, and curriculum, community leaders, pilot zone, land trusts, and councils, investors and donors, ethical investment, infrastructure funding, professionals, law, finance, health, engineering, and data, everyday people for learning, organizing, and supporting locally. This is not about waiting to be saved. It's about learning how to govern ourselves. The closing statement is CSRM moves us from protest to policy, from faith to infrastructure, from reaction to reconstruction, and from survival to sovereignty. Reconstruction begins when revelation becomes revolution and installs the art of governance. This is not a game. This is our initiative for 2026 and beyond to get this model installed. And I went over with y'all volume 3. This is representing volume 1 and volume 2. Volume 3, we go into how to implement it in the community. I went over that with y'all before. So if you want to get on board for this, because we need all hands on deck to get this cracking, then sign up for KHM. If you want to know the immediate benefits that you get with KHM, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. And then we can go and proceed from there. All praises. All praises. All right. Appreciate it. Just wanted to share that with y'all. Click the link in the description to sign up for KHM. And let's get this cracking. If you want to see what I share with you, get on Patreon. You'll be able to view it. But all your support is necessary. Hands on deck. Willingness to be volunteers. Spreading the word. All of this helps to assist to us to get this project off the ground. Okay? All right. I'm not talking to the right audience, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't value this information. So let's move forward. Let's move forward. All right. All right, so I see a lot of people had jumped in the chat. I'm going to transition to the Q&A before we close out. We got 30 minutes. We can do Q&A. I want to say I recently had a session with Genesis. The brother Hassan was on here earlier, and that session was in regards to Gentiles salvation. I know that is a buzz phrase now in the community, and everybody's talking about it. But really, that's really camp politics, right? So they've invited me on the show to give some insight in regards to it. So I provided some insight. We're going to be doing a follow-up session as well. And I'm just skimming the surface, right? Because we've taught on this in this channel several times in the past. But I think I may need to do a PowerPoint on it since this is really buzzing in the community. But I mean, this is something that is like, it's not new information, right? It's not new information. And if you subscribe to this, it does not, delineate you from being an Israelite and remove you from the covenant of identifying as Israel. It doesn't do that, right? You got to understand the underworkings, the underpinnings of this doctrine. It has roots that's deeper than the Israel-only doctrine. And what happens, a lot of people have the Israel-only doctrine. They're not looking at existential data outside the scriptures because that already validates that Paul was going to Gentile. For example, and I use this as proof. Now, this is not biblical per se, but extra biblically, when you study the Ebionites and the Nazarenes, they were mad at Paul because Paul was bringing the gospel to Gentiles. And then the Jews amongst those Gentiles, they believe he was saying to them, don't get circumcised, don't follow customs, don't follow Torah. And that's why they repudiated the works of Paul, because they knew Paul wasn't going to only Israelites. They knew that he was going to Gentiles as well. This is why you get Acts chapter 21 in that council with James. That's proof right there that they was going to Gentiles, not just Israelites. But when you ignore history, that's where it leaves you. And that's problematic. So when I do a PowerPoint on this, which I've done in the past, I did one on the Ebionites and Nazarenes before and their views on Paul and what they felt about Gentiles, etc. They understood that Paul and some other apostles were bringing this gospel to Gentiles to bring them into the fold. And they explained why. We have that information. Then we have patristic sources that hate on the Ebionites and Nazarenes, and they understand from the first century sources that we have onward. Hey, these sources go back to the first century while the New Testament was still being written. But you'd have to ignore and throw out all that data in order to make an Israel-only doctrine work. If only Israel is going to be saved, where are your so-called slaves coming from? Where are your slaves coming from? I know those believe in reincarnation, that when an Edomite dies, he's going to come back, and then eventually he's going to be your slave, right? Well, if salvation is only for Israel as a nation, yes, salvation, which means from our enemies, we're going to be redeemed from our enemies. We see this in what? Matthew 1, Luke 1, right? We see this in the Tanakh. Political redemption from the enemies, the other governing polities that are ruling over us. That's one form of salvation. Second form of salvation is internal, where Yah has to remove this heart of stone, like we see in Ezekiel chapter 11. Give us a heart of flesh and give us a renewed spirit, a new spirit. Yeshua came to help deliver that new spirit according to Ezekiel chapter 11. That's why Yeshua says in John chapter 3 to Nicodemus, aren't you a teacher of Israel and you don't know these things? How you don't know about being born again? Where's that at? In Ezekiel chapter 11. That's part of the new covenant. That your heart of stone is removed. You get a heart of flesh. You get a renewed spirit. And then you keep his statute, laws, and commandments. Without having somebody to give you precept after precept after precept, it'll already be ingrained in you. So when you're looking at this from a paradigmic level, you have to ask certain questions that will key into whether or not Paul was only going to Israelites or did he also go to Gentiles? If he went to Gentiles, if Cornelius is a Gentile that Peter went to, what are their role? Remember, there's 4 groups that we'll find in the New Testament. You have the ethnic Israelites. You have the Israelites who were Hellenized. You have the proselytes, which were Gentile converts to Judaism. We see some of these elements in the book of Ruth. And then we see some also in the book of Esther. And that's what it says. And they became Jews. Well, their ethnicity didn't change, but they converted over. Conversion started in the Persian period because Judaism became a religion in the Persian period. And I've shared this before. I've given sources for this before. You can go on to Patreon and source this for yourself. The oral tradition also helped to regulate Gentiles that were amongst, or strangers that were amongst the Israelites. So when I put that work together about the oral law, that it's not coming from Sinai, but coming from Persia, I mentioned some of that in that work. That's based on research. I put a recent book on Patreon that goes into the material religion and culture of the Israelites while they was in Elephantine Island and while they was in Babylon or Mesopotamia. What I'm saying is the people who heavily soak themselves in an Israel-only doctrine are neglecting all of this existential data. And I'm not saying they're absolutely wrong. I'm not saying that. There's some truth to that. But what I'm saying is you're ignoring the other half of truth. We can't do that. Over here, we look at all data. All right? So just saying. All right. So I see that you'll ask some questions. We have about 25 minutes. We're going to try to shut down at 7. Let me see what else you got. Let me see what you're putting up. I don't know what's going on. Let me give a couple of shout outs. Shout out to, let me see who else I see is new in here. Jaslyn Berry, shalom. Roderick Ladson, shalom. Shakur, the young lion, shalom. Remember, I gave a couple of shout outs. Shout out to Randall Hall for your support. Appreciate it. Shout out to Aaron, who just joined us on the Patreon. Shout out to all the Patreon members, all the KHM members, all the supporters and donors in this channel, all our viewers, those who pray for us, those who share these videos. Shout out to all of y'all. It's innumerable for me to enumerate everybody that has supported, but I'm going to try to continue to do that. If y'all okay with me shouting y'all out, some of y'all say, no, don't mention my name. I'm cool. So I don't mention somebody's name. Some people don't say nothing at all. So I mention them. But I want to thank all of you for your support. All right. Everybody in here now is rocking with us. All praise to the Most High. Whether you're here to argue, disagree, critique, whether you're here sincerely to learn, whether you're here to contribute your knowledge and body of work, we want to take it all. You can't have one without the other. You can't have praise without the criticism. You need both. And you need to know how to navigate between both sides and have even scale, weights and scales. All right. Shout out to Crazy Flow 1K, Big Chief Prince Vision, shalom. Chef 673, Big Cotton, shalom. Stacks 2296, shalom. Yashar Napash, thank you for the donation, brother. Shalom. Let me see. DJ Light, shalom. Ken P, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that, my brother. Larry Jackson, shalom. Feed the Spirit, shalom. Daniel Yaziah, shalom. Let's see, who else? Let me see. Robbie Haywood, shalom king, pray all as well. DB Hakodesh Management in the building. Hebrew Elevation, shalom. Watcher 215, shalom. GDN Capone, shalom. What's going on? Let me see. Shabar for Truth in the building, shalom. Chris Mathis, shalom. Gavin Miller, shalom king. Thank you for the donation. I appreciate that. KHM in the building. Let's see. Who else? Kazakh. Yasharal, shalom. Yaakov 27, shalom. Gitwa, shalom. Watcher, shalom. IMJ Showtime, peace and shalom king. I see some of your questions in here already. I'm trying to get all the shout outs out the way. My brother Ash in the building, shalom. Daryl, what's that? Daryl Thompson, shalom. Let me see. Wayne Prophet. Y'all asking a lot of interesting questions today. James 1-1, shalom. Nate the Great, shalom. Malak Ben Yisrael, shalom. And we got a full house today. LR 4661, shalom. Yirmyahu, Gawid Ben Yachanan, shalom king. Let's see. Who else we got? Gadal HaGadol in the building. Shalom. What's going on, my brother? Jose Yahawada, shalom. Roderick Ladson, shalom. All right. I'm going out of breath saying all these names, man. All praise to the Most High. Again, hit the share link and give it out everywhere, all social media. Subscribe if you're brand new. I see some brand new people up in here. Subscribe, hit the bell notification, click on, get locked in. If you think what we're saying on this live is fire, y'all ain't check out the archives. And also, if your questions don't get answered on this channel, jump over to Patreon. We got a free chat and a paid chat. You can continue your questions there, and either I will directly answer them or the community on Patreon will answer the questions for you. The 365, 24/7 after party to this YouTube is on Patreon. www.patreon.com/Divine Prospect. If anything happens to this channel, if it gets removed, because again, we get videos removed like every quarter. They remove 1 or 2 videos off this channel. If this channel gets removed, go over to the Patreon, sign up for the free or paid subscriptions, link in with us over here, lock in with us over there. We have never got any video banned or removed, no strikes or nothing over there. I share everything over there. We have a whole repository of data, videos, audio, content, software, websites. That's all over there. So you can get access to the information we share on this channel. Everything's over there on Patreon. Some stuff we hide behind a paywall, so it's not available publicly for people to strike it, for people to report it, or any other type of stuff. That's why some things are hidden behind a paywall, especially the CSRM. We don't want to let the cat out the bag too early, so we got to hide it behind a paywall. And for those of the ones who want to lock in with it, they can get access to it, and they're willing to support. So all praises. All praises. All right. Stacks, no, my number is the same, my brother. It's still the same. All right. Shout out to Daryl Thompson. Thank you for the donation. D, we in the building, my brother. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Y'all got me amped up. I wish I could stay on for another 2-3 hours, but I ain't got that much time. Y'all praise it. All right. So let me answer a couple of questions. And again, if your questions don't get answered, please hold it and ask it on the next live stream. I'm going to do a pop-up live stream next week and another pop-up live stream when Christmas is here. Also, I got to work coming out like I did on Halloween. I got to work for Christmas. We're going to serve you that work for Christmas. And you got to ask your family, friends, pastor, ex-pastor, whoever, hey, I got this new research paper on Christmas. Can you answer these questions for me? Where did all these other customs and stuff come from? This is about Jesus, baby Jesus, who was in a manger, baby Jesus. Pastor, ain't you saying this is God the Son, the second person of the Trinity? He's a little baby in a manger. He came out of a woman's womb with blood on him. And then Miriam had to go and follow the Torah to go through the purification rites. This is Yahweh in flesh. Where all these other customs come from? And we're celebrating baby Jesus, my Lord and Savior, baby Jesus. It's a nasty word. But we're going to put the work out. We're going to give you a source that you can just send to your family, friends, associates, etc. And just have them contend with the data. You ain't got to worry about what we're saying. DJ Light. Okay, let me try to start answer some questions. Does believing in the Trinity make you a polytheist? No, it doesn't. And I say no, it doesn't because a lot of people misunderstand the Trinity. Okay, I'm going to give you an oversimplification of what the Trinity teaches. Remember, I'm not a Trinitarian. I don't profess the Trinity. The Trinity is not biblical from my perspective. However, I am not going to mispresent the position simply because I disagree with it. The Trinity believes in this. Yahweh is an essence. Yahweh is a substance. It's an essence. All right? That essence, within that essence, is the ability to create, is the ability to have power, authority, and sovereignty over all creation. It's an essence, okay? However, that essence is multifaceted as it's represented by 3 persons. The 3 persons emanate from the essence called Yahweh. It's not 3 gods. It's one essence, one entity that is represented multi-personal through 3 persons. Emanating out of that essence is the person of the Father, the person of the Son, and the person of the Holy Spirit. There's an ontological trinity on how they relate with one another, and an ecumenical trinity, or what we call an economic trinity. The ecumenical means one, the oneness that is spoken of in John chapter 10, verse 30. That's the one, me and the Father are one, that ecumenical trinity. But the economic trinity is how the Trinity is revealed in the earth within creation on how the essence of Yahweh is going to redeem mankind. So the Father plays a role in redemption, the Son plays a role in redemption, and the Spirit plays a role in redemption. They're not three separate gods. They all are emanating from one essence called Yahweh. So if you believe in the Trinity, you are not a polytheist. If you believe in the Trinity, you have an issue with the personage of the Most High, clearly, but you're not a polytheist. So if you believe in the Trinity, you're not a polytheist. This is why you'll see Trinitarians push back on that, because the Trinity does not mean you're a polytheist. Now, if you subscribe to the Trinity or view it in a way outside of the paradigm I just shared with you, then yes, you are a polytheist. If you see it the same way that the Greco-Roman culture saw it, or that cultures in the past from Babylon and others saw the Trinity, meaning you had three separate gods, represent some aspect of the nuclear family. You have a mother, you have a father, and you have a child. That was the Trinity in ancient times. Or you have three deities like Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. That's the Trinity. And then you have other triplets of deities in other cultures. You even had hybridization of these deities in the cultures, like Amun-Ra in Mizraim and Egypt, etc. So no, if you subscribe to the Trinity, you're not a polytheist by definition, or I would say theological definition of the Trinity. You have an issue with the personness of the Most High, but that essence, which is Yahweh, it emanates from three persons. That's what they teach. I don't subscribe to that, but that's what they teach. And that is if I'm going to faithfully represent the position, which I try to do, whether I disagree with it or not. All right. All right. So let me see what else y'all got. Yes, or a triad. Thank you, Malak Ben Yasharal. A triad. I agree, King David. There's no Trinity, but there's some that argue for it. Also, I have that Clubhouse video that I told you I'm putting on Patreon. I go over Ezekiel 28 and show you that it has nothing to do with Satan, Lucifer, or the devil. Ezekiel 28 has nothing to do with Satan, Lucifer, or the devil. Somebody tried to challenge me on that on Clubhouse, and I just had to deconstruct them and reassemble them. And after the conversation ensued to its culmination, they really had no response to it. When you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, that would explain the portion of Ezekiel 28 that people say, oh, that's talking about Lucifer, that's talking about Satan. And I say, no, let's go over Paradise Lost. I go over Paradise Lost in Dante's Inferno. I show you some of this background information. We go into apocryphal works and pseudepigraphal works that start to build up this profile about Satan. However, Ezekiel 28 in its historical perspective has nothing to do with Satan, Lucifer, or the devil. You're going to say, but it talks about the anointed cherub. Was Satan, Lucifer, or the devil, or the serpent in the garden, was that an anointed cherub? No, it was a seraph. Okay, there's a lot of issues with that. Sign up for the Patreon. Go check out the video. I'm gonna drop it tonight on the Patreon. Check it out. I just want to point that out because that's very important, because that's very, very misleading, and it misrepresents what the text is saying from its author to its recipient immediate audience. That is how you have to interpret it, and then you extract the value for that and you apply it to yourself today, or map it according to your current life application. All right, let's get back to these questions. All right, let's see what's going on. So Shalom Divine, is it unlawful to get a vasectomy? I don't see that anywhere explicitly laid out in scripture. Now, if we go into the rabbinic teachings, there's some stuff on that, but according to the text, no. The only case that we saw in which the illicit use of semen is in the Onan situation, right? Onan was supposed to take his brother's wife and bear seed unto him, but he pulled out and he did his thing on the ground. When he did that, he was judged and he died. Now, the question was he trying to avoid raising a son? That's what it seemed like. He broke the law, what we call the Levirate marriage. That is a rule that he broke, meaning that in ancient times, especially in these Bedouin cultures, if let's say, for example, I lived in that time and I had a brother and I married, had a wife, but we had no child, especially no son to be an heir of my heritage and everything else I pass on. If I die, my brother is to take my wife, right? She's not my wife no more, my ex-wife. Take her, consummate with her, bear son, and that child would be my heir, right? Then he has to take care of that wife. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't get another wife, but she becomes a peripheral wife. Now, if he wants to separate from her, which at that time most of them did, so that she can find somebody else, they did that. But he has to bear seed. So knowing that this is in the cultural memory, the social memory of those Bedouin tribes, Semitic Bedouin tribes that descend from Abraham, and they understand this, when Onan, he was tasked to do that. He broke the law by not bearing that child. That's why he died. Had nothing to do with birth control. Nothing to do with birth control. It's because he had a responsibility and a task to fulfill, and he avoided it. So vasectomies are done as a means of birth control. There's nothing in the Torah that says explicitly that that is against the law. So if you choose to do that between your own personal decision or you and your Isha or whoever else, then that's fine. The law does not say anything against it. All right. So I'm gonna fall back on that. Hopefully that answers your question. All right. Gadal, my brother, please read it and give me your feedback, my brother. You know you're my brother. Brother from another mother. That's my Clubhouse brother right there. Go subscribe to his channel, man. He do Torah After Dark. Go subscribe to Gadal's channel. It's my brother. All right. Let me see. All right. What is your position on when first fruits should be kept? Do you believe the rendering in the LXX is correct or not? All right. So in regards to first fruits, we have that on the calendar, but we don't keep first fruits, right? Only because you have to be in the land in order to do that and get from the land from that and give it to the priest. There's no priest to give anything to, and we're not getting those same crops from the land the way they're supposed to be gathered to be given to the priest. That is a Thanksgiving feast that you give unto the Most High Yah, because he allowed you to be prosperous in the land. He allowed your crops to grow so that you can reap them and benefit for it, and you have to provide that to him. That's the first fruits. Again, first fruits is the marker after Feast of Unleavened Bread that you count from in order to get your Shavuot, which technically also is a feast that should be kept in the land. However, with Shavuot, it's a little different because there's a requirement according to Deuteronomy chapter 16, along with Passover, unleavened bread, Shavuot, and Feast of Tabernacles. Those are the times that the men are to appear 3 times a year and go and give an offering, not come empty unto the Most High Yah, because these are seasonal. One is for the spring, one is for the summer, and one is for the fall. The winter doesn't count. There's nothing given during the winter. That's the wintry rainy season that occurs for 4 months in Israel. So there's no feasting, as feasting typically took place outside. It was cold, it was rainy, so they typically did not keep feasts until after we get the Greece in captivity, where we then institute Hanukkah. Well, before that, Purim, and then Hanukkah. Now, these can fall during the winter time, but the Torah prescribed ones do not fall anytime in the winter. If you see them falling within the winter, something's wrong with your calendrical model, and you need to recalibrate that joint. We don't fall for that. So that's my position on first fruits. It shouldn't be kept. Do you believe the rendering in the LXX is correct or not? Excellent question. Email me for that answer, because I got to go through textual criticism with you and show you where the weight falls in regards to the evidence that we get from comparing that with the Masoretic text. Excellent question, but I will reserve that for another time, because I'm trying to do a quick hot seat answer of these questions so we can kind of move on through. All right. All right. So Gutter Brew, can I get the Gilgamesh thing? Yes, the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'll definitely gift you with that. If you want any other books or resources, join the Patreon. Look for it on the Patreon after you subscribe, and it's all there. I have almost 600 books on there and over 200 and something articles on there for every subject, almost every subject that we discuss on this channel. But I'll go ahead and give that to you. No problem. All right. I'm going to give you the Gilgamesh. Here it is. And again, when I release this on Patreon as well, I'll have the link to this as well on Patreon. So this is for you, Gutter Brew. Click the link in the chat, Gutter Brew. All right. All right. Wait. Hey, yo, Torah Nights. Hey, yo, y'all go back and check out the video I did with Torah Nights. And I jumped on there as a guest. I wasn't even prepared to talk. But they were trying to prove that their Hebrew is superior to biblical Hebrew. And they failed miserably. They really failed. After that, they were talking about a debate. I said, let's do it. They never set up a debate. Now they're talking about me in regards to this language because of Zion Lex coming out on Inside the Radio and him talking about biblical Hebrew. And right underneath what you said, Ayo, if you go over there and tell Torah Knights that I'm down for debate, me against all of them. Me against all of them. Let them know. Go run tell that to them. All right. Divine, not sure if you said anything so far regarding Zion's rebuttal on Lashawan Yahawada. You mean Lashawan Kadash? I think we're talking about. I have a lot of respect for Brother Kelly Richardson, but he used AI to prove the validity of it. I respect Brother Kelly Richardson as well. He holds to the Lashawan Kadash. I don't subscribe to Lashawan Kadash personally, but I understand why people say it's antiquated, it's old. However, there are a lot of grammatical difficulties with the Lashawan Kadash, and I would love to have a sit-down discussion with anybody in regards to that. Now, I was not invited to that episode of Inside the Radio. I had no clue what's going on. Nobody pinged me. Nobody sent me a link. Nobody said, hey, Divine, join on in. I didn't get anything from anybody on that. I didn't even know that was happening until it was happening. And what was happening came on my feed. I said, yo, what's this? And I saw the latter end of it. And I was like, all right, well, I probably can call in or kind of support it. I think as it was going on earlier in it, because I got it in my feed, I said, yo, let me go and send some stuff on it. But nobody told me in advance. I saw it while it was happening in real time with everybody else. I was like, man, this would have been a good opportunity for me to actually go on and kind of support the brother. But because nobody told me, I stayed away. I said, all right, they're going to do what they're going to do. It's all good. But my position is, y'all know I share about the Hebrew. Matter of fact, go back and watch that video I did when I battled Torah Knights on Sanetta's platform, his debate platform, right? The secondary channel. And I went over the Hebrew with them. And then on this page in the post section, I asked questions to Torah Knights in regards to, well, how do you handle this? How do you handle that? How do you handle that with your pronunciation of the language? You got no Masorah to prove a traditional, a lineage of your vocalization tradition that goes back into time. How do y'all deal with the Palestinian and the Babylonian vocalization systems? They have a Masorah on vocalization systems, grammar, etc., with the diacritic marks. This precedes or comes before you get the Tiberian vocalization in the Masoretic text. Your system also, how does it work without the diacritic marks? I hear your pronunciation, but how does your grammar work? It's because of the Masorah of the Masoretic text that we're able to retroactively reverse engineer all the other vocalization systems and understand it. So we got to give credit is due. However, total credit doesn't go there because the Samaritan Jews, they also have their scroll, their Abisha scroll, and other scrolls representing the Samaritan Pentateuch, and they have their own Masorean tradition that's independent and distinct from the Masoretic tradition. We also know that there was a vocalization system amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. However, they didn't preserve it for us to understand it today. So we understand it by means of using a Masorah from the Masoretic text and the diacritic marks and the Kudot from the Masoretic text. But you can reconstruct that because in 2025, we have a lot more data of Semitic languages in the ancient Near East that we can reconstruct the Hebrew without the Masorah from the Masoretic text. But in order for us to get to that point, the Masorah was essential to reverse engineering and translating and interpreting these other ancient Hebrew texts. Even when we get to epigraphs, administrative text that's incised into stone. Okay. All right. All right. I think people's perspective on Christianity is lazy. Christianity is pure syncretism. What you think, Divine? People threw the word polytheistic around, but it's bigger than that. Pure syncretism. Yes, Christianity has an element of syncretism. Remember, the earliest people in the movement were Jews practicing Judaism, and they saw Yeshua as the Messiah and saw no contradiction between that. It's when the Gentiles came in, usurped the authority of the Jews over the movement, and began to infiltrate it and invade it with prior philosophies and working those prior philosophies into the mix of Messianism and contributed to what we call Christianity today. The earliest movements The ones with the material culture, material religion, they didn't see it like that. They saw Yeshua through the lens of Judaism, or what we call through the Tanakh, and the intertestamental work through the Tanakh, where we get the development of the term Son of Man, the development of the term Son of God, and other messianic tropes and typologies that works its way all the way up into the 1st century CE. You can't erase or neglect that history. Christianity removed and stripped out the Israelite portion, the Jew portion, and they co-opted with Gentile philosophy and ideologies. I put several works on the page, on the Patreon page, and on here, pointing to academic works we have that speak about this. Yeah. Let me give you a freebie. I like sharing freebies with y'all. Let me give you all a freebie. Let me see if I could find it real quick and drop it up in there for you. Yeah. Where is it at? Where is it at? There it is. Light from the Gentiles, Hellenistic philosophy, and early Christianity. I'm going to drop that in there for y'all. It's a freebie for y'all. He's going to be giving every old thing out tonight. All right. All praises. All right. Okay. Shalom. Okay, Ramal Yahu. Shalom, King. Shalom. All right. Okay, here we go. JB, the word replenish means that there were people before that current creation of male and female in Genesis 1. Okay. Let me address this real quick. This is why y'all got to get in class. Hey, get in class. Get in class. In our classes, the KHM Holistic Research Paradigm for Bible Study, we discuss this type of stuff, right? We didn't go heavy in detail yet, but we discuss this type of stuff. We show you how to interpret these passages and how to make sense of things. We're using Genesis 1:1 as an example, and I go over those details. So here's the thing. When we go into Genesis 1 is a temporal clause that's dependent on Genesis 1 and 3 to continue and complete its thought. Genesis 1 and 2 is parenthetical information to let us know the background before we get to Genesis 1 and 1 and Genesis 1 and 3. In our classes, we show you how this is connected. We go into the way Yiktol, and we go into the detail about what a temporal clause is, and we go into the different positions in on this. Matter of fact, I even give you a sample of that on this channel. Just check back in the past 2 months and look for all the samples we give you from the classes. So we go into this gap theory that some people have between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1 and 2, that something happened. Because in the translation of Genesis 1 and 2, it says, and the earth was void and empty. So that those terms relate back to Jeremiah 4:23, where Jeremiah uses the same thing to identify the state of Jerusalem and the land around Jerusalem because of judgment. And then he says the land was empty and void. So he uses the same terminologies, and he says he looked in the sky and behold, there was no light. So he's paralleling what happened in Judah to the beginning of creation. But a judgment had to occur for that to happen. So we go in and we give details about the Most High slaying and destroying a destructive, chaotic sea dragon. And once that thing was destroyed and the waters were tamed, he recreated the earth. What we get in Genesis 1, where he says, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And he created that hominid, that mankind creature. He singled out Adam from that mankind creature, and he created Adam to live in the garden. Adam disobeyed. He got excommunicated from the garden. And when the flood came, it was there to wipe away that archaic man that he created in Genesis 1 that started to infiltrate and mingled in with the seed. And then the sons of God comes and mingled with them. And then we have this triangulation of illicit hybridization that's occurring. So he wipes that out and maintains the seed of Seth, gets rid of the seed of Cain and any other residual man hominid entities, wipes them out and restarts from scratch. So there is believed to be a pre-Adamic race. And there's a lot of evidence for that, especially against the ancient Greeks. However, I'm not saying that that's wrong because there's two positions on that. Some people say that what we see in Genesis 1 is just a summary, and then Genesis 2 goes further in detail. Some say no, the creation epic we see in Genesis 2 seems to be different, especially when plants are growing, than what we see in Genesis 1. There's a way to harmonize that. How do we do so? Get in class. Sign up for the Patreon, www.patreon.com/Divine Prospect. Sign up for the $50 tier. Get in class. You'll get access to all the old classes, plus all the resources. We give you all the books, all the papers, all the articles. We give you the maps. We give you the atlas. We give you everything you need, the surveys of the New Testament, the Old Testament. We give you everything you need to get into class, to learn, and then we move on. Right now, we're on the third inductive research methodology element, which is, well, let's do the first one. The first one is the grammatical lexical analysis. We go into the grammar, we look up words, we understand their semantic range, and we use that data to go and interpret any passage of the Bible. The second one is the contextual analysis. We look at the immediate context within that chapter or chapter before or after to interpret a particular passage or to help in the interpretation. And then we go to the low intertextual analysis, where we escape out of that immediate context and look for other books that the author has generated. So if we're saying that Moses is the author, not the writer or the redactor of the Torah, the first 5 books, if I go into one passage in the Torah and I read it and try to understand it, I can also find in those other 5 books some additional insight to interpret that singular passage. That is what we call the intertextual analysis, where we're just looking for that low intertextual analysis with just those books from the same author. When we go to the high intertextual analysis, now we're looking for themes or motifs outside of that one author's work to multiple authors spread across the anthology of what we call the Bible for insight. And we use this methodology, those 4 portions. What we're doing next is the third one, which is the low intertextual analysis. Once we accomplish that, we get to the high intertextual analysis. Once we accomplish that, we go into the textual analysis, where we look at textual variance amongst all representations and co-witnesses of what we call the Torah and the Tanakh. And then from there, we elevate to the evidential analysis. And there we go into additional analysis, all till we see where the preponderance of the evidence lies. Where does the data point us to and how we should interpret and translate this particular passage so that we have relative understanding today, and we're not using dative methods for interpreting stuff that is not best represents the material culture and the underlying lived experiences of the people groups that brought forth the end product, which we call the scriptures. Now, you may want to rewind that back a few times on the replay. You'll get it, but you'll understand what I'm saying. When you learn how to interpret the text, you can look at any passage and make sense out of it, void of any external voices that may be selling you presuppositions that may refrain you from properly interpreting the text. Get in class. This is why we have classes here, so we can teach you this methodology. This is not a secret. It's something that I created based on my 15 years of research, and now I'm putting it into a course for you to have, so you can take this with you. You can interpret the text the way it was meant to be interpreted. You can translate it appropriately, and you can pass this on, or you can contribute to the body of work, so that way it becomes something bigger than even I envision, you envision, because no one man can complete this task alone. We need a community to do it. And everything we do here at Kingdom Harbinger Ministries centers around community. Y'all are necessary for this information to get where it needs to go, and for contributing and adding to the corpus of work, so we can create a whole, an avalanche of inside information that comes from our voice and not those on the outside. They want to be us so bad, but they can't. They can't jack our swag. It can't happen. Most High chose us for a reason, for this day that we see right now. All praises to the Most High. Okay. All right. Last question, and then I got to get out of here. Again, go over to the Patreon. You can do a free sign up or a paid sign up. There's different things you get at different tiers, but we have chats over there that you can take these questions and ask them over there on the Patreon, and we can continue these conversations. You can get your questions answered. You can get locked into the repository of information, knowledge, and information, resources, and stuff that we have over there. Lock in with us, family. And I thank y'all for being here. All right. Let me see. Last question. Let me see what else is there. You have a whole bunch of questions in here. Let me scroll on up to see if I can see any early questions. Let me see. Oh, my brother, Barack, I got you, King. No doubt. Let me see. All right, let me see. I am Jay Showtime. Shalom Divine. Do you have a comprehensive list of all Torah commandments that can be kept in exile? Excellent question. I started working on that, but because you asked it, I'm going to finish it and complete it. And then I'm going to do a class on it. Thank you for that. Hey, my brother Showtime, email me, kingdomharbinger@gmail.com with this specific inquiry so I can get to work on that so I don't forget it. All right? Okay. Let me see. Let me see. Hey, historically it has happened. Even in recent history, it's happened, brother. It has. And I definitely would love to share it here at some point, but yeah, it has. All right, let me see. Any last questions? All right, here's the last one. Will we have to this discussion sometime in the future? What I will have to present will be interesting to say the least. All right. So you want to discuss with me, and this is prior to my conversation with Zion Lex, which is fine. You want to discuss with me whether or not the oral tradition that is preserved in Judaism today goes back to Sinai and not to the Persian period. So Chef, if you want to have that conversation, let me know. Sign up for not sign up, but be here next Friday when we go live. And then say you're present, and I'll give you the space to present, and we can go back and forth for that. No problem. I would love to hear your perspective, brother. I know there's a lot of different perspectives on that. I would love to hear yours. All right. Let me see. Okay, I think I'm gonna close out on that. I'll say this. Let me see. Yeah, that's a very layered conversation, a compositional discussion that must be had on that. Because they even shared papers on that in regards to that too, about how your haplogroup cannot determine whether you're a Jew or not. All right. So shout out to my brother KB Aded. What's going on, King? Did you say there is evidence or info of people here along with Adam? Yes, there is. When we look at Genesis chapter 4, we have some of those details, and Genesis chapter 1 gives us some of those details. When we look at it in light of the ancient Near East, the Bible was not created in a silo, in isolation. It was created or emerged out of the matrix of the ancient Near East. So we have to view it against that background. It does give us some insight, but not all this insight that we derive from the ancient Near East is inspired, but some of it does fill in the blanks for us to understand what's going on in the corpus of the book of Bereshit or Genesis. All right. And last question. I'm gonna take this one. Was Paul only talking to the scattered? Well, Paul first went to the Jews. The Jews did not receive him, and so he went to the Gentiles. He says this himself in the book of, or his epistle to Galatia, in the book of Galatians. He says that he is going to the circumcised, to uncircumcised, whereas Peter, James, and John are going to the circumcised. So Paul's authority is over the Gentiles, not the Jews. So that's important. So we have to keep that in mind. Then he says, did they sin? Yeah, they sinned. And they got wiped out with the flood. And they're not here no more. Only Seth's lineage exists. Remember, Seth was created in the image of God? No. Seth was created in the image of his father. There's a reason why the text says that, because the image bearer, that title does not get restored into David. That's a whole nother conversation. Right? But yes, that's my position on that. And you'll see, even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, well, Gilgamesh travels long and far to get to Utnapishtim to find out what is the secret of immortality. Then Utnapishtim tells him the story of the flood and how he received immortality. When Enlil sent forth the flood, he wanted to destroy mankind, but Enki desired to preserve mankind by way of his ardent worshiper Utnapishtim. All right. And when you go to see the travels and the journeys of Gilgamesh in that epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, you'll see that he comes across a jeweled garden. He comes across a holy mountain. He's in what's called the cedar forest of the cedar forest of Lebanon. All of these things that we see in Ezekiel 28, you will find it in the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? So again, in that flood epic, everybody was wiped out except for Utnapishtim and some others, but that's a whole nother conversation. You got to actually read the Epic of Gilgamesh. I gave you the link in the chat. You can check it out, and you can see that there's several other flood epics. But the data that we can pull from these flood epics is how they coincide with scripture. And there's certain words that's used in the book of Genesis that have cognates or a shared root with the same term used or a similar term used in these other ancient epics. That helps us to get some additional insight to what's going on in the places and where the text is implicit in Bereshit. It's a whole working, moving puzzle. All right? Okay. All right. I'm going to end off there. It's 15 minutes after the time I wanted to stop. Squeaky Clean YT, what is your question? Ask it real quick. Why should we trust Paul in the New Testament? Roderick Latson, I actually did a whole lecture on this like 7 years ago. 7 years ago. Let me see if I can find that for you real quick. And then what's your question, Squeaky? Ask it quick, brother. Wayne Prophet said, is it lawful to eat duck? Is it clean or no? Yes, go eat you some duck. Have some duck tonight, brother. All right? Have some duck. Have some duck. Have some geese. It's really interesting because remember I mentioned Eldad Hadani earlier and him being the reason why the Beta Israel in Ethiopia is recognized today as being authentic Jews? Well, he had a totally different halakha on how to determine what certain birds are clean and unclean. He said chicken was clean, and he explained because chicken had two stomachs. Now, he erroneously counted the gizzard as a stomach, even though the gizzard is presented to grind up using grit, grind up the food before it comes down the esophagus into the stomach to get digested. However, he determined that because it's considered to have two stomachs, it's considered to be clean. So if we use that same methodology against geese and ducks, we have something very interesting because people talk about the web footing of a duck, the ducks, floating over the water, pretty much not floating over the water, obviously, but being able to drift across the water, its feathers, all the whole entire anatomy of a duck. Is it clean or unclean, right? According to the Torah does not go into specific detail about it. However, there's commentaries on Midrash that does go into details about that. We would have to cover that another time, but enjoy your duck if you're going to get some duck tonight, all right? Let me see. All right, let me answer this last question real quick. Let me drop the link in the chat. Again, this is rapid fire tonight. I see I'm tripping up on my own words. I'm trying to go fast and quick. Let me do this, right? Let me go into share this link in the chat with you guys. Here's the link. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Let me see. Here it is. All right. That's for you. Can you tell me what Romans 10:4 means? Hey, Israelite Defense, thank you for reminding me of that. Are you willing to come on the channel next Friday so we can talk about that? I'll bring some data for you and we can go look over some stuff. I would love to talk to you about it, brother, because you've been very persistent. Let me know if you'll be available next Friday so we can have that conversation, okay? Okay, last one. Can you tell me what you think Romans 10:4 means? All right, I'm going to end off on this. I didn't bring up the scripture because I was answering so many questions in this session, but let me address that real quick. And then after this, no more questions. If you want your questions answered, hop on over to Patreon. We have open chats over there. Ask your questions over there. And either me or the community over there will help you to get an answer to your question, okay? So Romans chapter 10 and verse 9, verse 4, I'm sorry. All right. This one has been asked ad infinitum. I'm thoroughly familiar with it, but let's address it. Okay. Here we go. All right. First, let's start at verse 1. Okay. Remember two things. Let me tell you the two things about Paul real quick before we go into this, right? I'm going to go into Acts. We're going to do Acts 21. We're going to do Acts 26. And we're going to go back to Romans 10. All right. So you can understand Paul's perspective. All right. So Acts chapter 21, verses 17 on. I want y'all to read this, 17 to 26. All right. There were Jews that were saying that right here, verse 21, and they had been told about you, this is James talking to Paul, that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to their customs. What then will be done? So Paul is told to go with these other brothers to shave their head, purify himself, pay their expenses, right? And this is according to number 6, the law of the Nazarite. So verse 26, then Paul took them in, and the next day he purified himself along with them and went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification would be filled and the offering presented for each one. Paul keeps the law. We see that here. Acts chapter 26, last one before we go back to Romans chapter 10. Paul says specifically here, let's go down. Let's take it right here. Where we going to go at? Let me see. No, that's Yeshua. Okay. Let's go here. Let's go here. He goes on his history about being a Pharisee. Okay, let me see. I want to jump down to. Let's go at the end of here. Let's go at the end of here. Where do I want to go? My tab closed. Let's go to the previous chapter. Something in his life I want to go in here about him being a Pharisee. He said, they have known for a long time if they are willing to testify that according to the strictest party of our religion, I have lived as a Pharisee. Now, when we go back in the previous chapter, which is chapter 25, let's go to 25 real quick. Verse 8, Paul argued in his defense, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. According to the law of the Jews, if he tells Jews, as we see in Acts 21, to forsake the law of Moses, right, the law is done away with. If he says that, then he's a liar here. But Paul has not committed any offense against the law. And he also keeps the law, which he showcases in Acts chapter 21. Now let's go to Romans chapter 10. Okay? And let's see what he says here in this context in Romans chapter 10. Come on. All right. It says, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved. Now, who's the them? You got to read the final verses in chapter 9. And he's talking to Israel, right? Israel's unbelief when he says them. All right. Now, let's keep going. Then he says, for I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. Sounds misleading to say, oh, the law is done away with. No. Hey, read this. You see the NIV says, Christ is the culmination of the law, so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes. Remember, Paul also talks about the wall of partition between the Jew and Gentile and how Christ removed that so that the Gentiles can cleave unto the Jews. Now it says he is the culmination of the law, not the end of the law. This word end is, means terminus, means terminated. That's not a really good way to convey what's being said. But when he says the end, the word is telos. This is the same word, conjugation of the same word is used in Matthew chapter 5, right? Which we all are familiar with. Let's go to Matthew chapter 5. He tells you in Matthew, Paul's just referring to what he's saying in Matthew chapter 5. What does he say in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17 that we all are familiar with? Let's go down. Do not think I have come to abolish the law, destroy the law, terminate the law, end the law, all the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill them. We're going to see. This is the same word that's used there. Where is it at? Hold on. Prophetos on katasan Allah plerusai. Excuse me. Not the same word, the same synonym. That's what I meant to say. Forgive me. Teleos or telos and plerusai. These are two words meaning to fulfill something, but fulfill in what way? Let's go back to telos first, and I'm going to go back to here and show you that they're talking about the same thing because this refers to the law. Paul speaking pharisaically about the law as a Pharisee, he's talking in regards to the law, and Yeshua is talking to the law as somebody who's a great teacher outside of the lineage of the Pharisees. But when we go into this word, I want you to see this word and why culminate is better than end. I think end is a bad translation, is because it just simply means to finally or utmost or continuously complete something or bring something to its ultimate zenith. The point aimed at as a limit. There was a gap in the law that could not be fulfilled because Israel kept swaying away from the law. So when Yeshua came, he taught his midrash on the law, as we see in Matthew chapter 5, where he's filling in the gaps that the legalism of Judaism at the time were creating. And he came to fill those gaps so that wall, the Gezeirah, that fence that is used to move you away from the Torah, so it's there as a buffer so you don't violate Torah, he came to remove that. That's what he came to complete. That's what he came to terminate and remove. So that way, the Pharisees had a whole method of conversion for a Gentile. And they started to teach, as we see in Acts 15, that they had to first convert via the process through the Pharisees. Then they had to adhere to the law of Moses. Then they had to do this before, as a prerequisite, before they can be saved. Yeshua came to remove that. We see him go back and forth with the Pharisees in Mark chapter 7. So he came to fulfill it, to culminate its point. The culminate which the law needed to be magnified in a way so that the people can keep it according to Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 11, that the law is not far from you, but it's nigh unto you. You don't have to go to heaven to seek for it. You have to go into the depths to seek for it, but it's nigh unto you. It's towards or near your heart so that you can keep it. But when somebody creates a fence around it and additional laws, they remove you and separate you from that. Yeshua came to remove that out the way. And in doing so, he came to bring the law to its ultimate point, which is to point to someone that can help us get to the law as it was intended to be written on our hearts, written on our minds, as we see in Ezekiel chapter 11, Ezekiel chapter 36. So that way we can fully come into this new covenant as expressed in Jeremiah chapter 31, and that we can then be with Yah and regathered and placed into the land of those that are Israel and those who are Gentiles, so they can cleave unto Israel. And with him, he has completed the mission that Yah sought for the law to task and to do. And that is, again, to bring about the new covenant so that we can get these things internally. And with it internally, we can resist against the abominations that Yah wants us to pull away from, and that we can finally come into the rest that we see in Hebrews chapter 4 that he intended for us to have since the Israelites under Joshua's jurisdiction came into the land of Egypt, and they did not get to rest in. So when it says that he's the end of the law, no, he is the purpose of why the law exists. It's to bring us into that new covenant so that everything can be written internally, so that we know how to interpret the law outside of everything that was given to us, precept upon precept, line upon line. We don't need that method anymore. He has simplified us and brought us closer to Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 11. The same way they say he said he never came to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, but to pleru, which means bring it to its fulfillment. This is a synonym. This word telos is a synonym to that, in which is doing the same thing. It is there to bring an act of conclusion to something, its ultimate climax, to bring it to its intended purpose. And also, we look at this word outside of that, we see also in Matthew 24 and 6 mentioned, Matthew 17, 25, where it is translated as a custom. Matthew 10 and 22 says, he that endures to the completion of time shall be saved, bringing something to its intended goal or definite point and purpose. That's what that means. So telos, and pleru are synonyms that are representing the same thing, that is to bring something to maturity or bring something to its intended purpose and not to abolish or eliminate it. Listen, the Gentiles are just the extension of Israel in exile. That's all. By extension, they cleave unto Israel. By extension, they become part of the nation of Israel. However, in Torah law, there's always a distinction between Jew and Gentile because both have their roles in the hierarchy of Israel. The covenant bearers, which are the Israelites, have it ethnically. The Gentiles are not the covenant bearers unless they keep it and pass it on to their children. A covenant bearer means by means of your ethnicity and by means of circumcision, your job for existing is to bring the light unto the Gentiles as a Jew. As we see in Romans chapter 3, what is the advantage of being a Jew? Much in every way, where they were entrusted with the very oracles of God. Their job is to speak the word of Yah and bring those around the world into the light of Yah. Those nations will serve Israel according to Torah in the end times to fulfill their penance of their nations for sieging, attacking, pillaging, and prosecuting and persecuting Israel over the century and long spent of time. So Romans chapter 10 and 4, Paul as a Torah keeper is not telling somebody else, getting rid of the law. He's not saying that. The law is abolished. He's not saying that because he himself practices in it. And he would be the Pharisees that Yeshua speaks against if he practiced it but told other people to break it. That would make absolutely no sense. But the Pharisaic method of conversion to bring people closer to Messiah, as we see in Acts chapter 15, that is what Paul is talking about. And he's saying that these Jews, they understood righteousness, they had a form of righteousness, but they overlooked the Messiah, Yeshua, who came to bring this to its completion for everyone who believes. Again, this is the Jew first, like he says in Romans 1, and the Gentile. Remember, he discusses hierarchy in which the gospel is given to the Jew first. That's his initial purpose and intention, and by extension to the Gentile. This is not saying the law is done away with. Paul's not saying that. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 17 onward, if you was called and you were circumcised, do not seek circumcision. But if you was uncircumcised, do not seek circumcision, because the important thing is the commandments of God. Gentiles are given the Noahide laws, according to Judaism, the Noahide laws to follow in order to count them as being righteous. 4 of those Noahide laws have been borrowed in Acts 15, which was delegated by the apostles Peter and James, that the Gentiles are to follow in order for them to be counted as righteousness. These would be the devout men, the ethnic Gentiles that are non-Israelites. These are the devout men. Then you have the proselytes. Then you have the Hellenized Jews, and then you have the ethnic Jews keeping Torah. Those are the 4 classes of individuals you will find in the New Testament. When you understand who Paul's authority and Paul's purpose is to go to and bring the gospel to, then everything will fall in line and make sense. Paul is not saying anything in contradiction to Yeshua, and Yeshua is not saying anything in contradiction to what Paul was teaching. However, Yeshua's audience was directly to the Jews. Paul's audience is directly to the Gentiles. So therefore, Paul relating to the Romans, which was a mixed group, mostly of Gentiles with some Jews there, he is speaking specifically in this passage to the Gentiles. And he's trying to let them understand that the righteousness of those Pharisees who are trying to parasitize you, right, to be parasites and take advantage of you, the Messiah removed that. You don't need that element no more. The same thing what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 23, when he goes out and says that you as a Pharisees go to a far part overseas to go convert a proselyte and make him twice amount of hell as you are. This is what they were doing. There was a strict process of doing that. Yeshua removed all the legalism and the gazara around the fence. He removed all of it and gave you the central core tenets of what the law is the weightier matters of mercy, of justice, and faithfulness. I'm going on 0 to 100 right now. When we understand that and we introduce that into the context of what we're reading, then what Paul's saying makes sense. This is, you got to understand who his audience is, what he's intending to do, and the mindset. This is a Pharisee speaking now, or somebody with a Pharisaic mindset speaking now to Gentiles and explaining the Christos to them that they did not have knowledge of previously, but they were, and they did come into contact with Pharisees that attempted to convert them. And now there are new Pharisees who are followers of the Messiah that's still trying to convert them so they can get to Messiah. He's saying Yeshua removed all of that. He's the purpose of why the law even exists. Not because legalism entered into the field by way of the Pharisees and later the rabbis. That fence is removed. We're going to bring you into the heart of Torah. And your end state is you're going to be in the kingdom with Israel. So again, there's no spiritual Israel. There's only Jews and Gentiles in the nation of Israel in exile. There's no spiritual Israel. So understand, Paul did not say the law is done away with. He is speaking to Gentiles who the Pharisees are trying to convert illicitly because it's not in the written Torah. And he's saying that Yeshua fulfilled that fence and he's going to guide you. If you love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, body, and soul, and love thy name as yourself, on this hinges the whole law. He's giving you the heart of the matter. When you take that heart that he has taught and you place that lev inside yourself, you will not violate the commandments of God. That is the full culmination of the law, and that's what he came to do, it from his own mouth in Matthew 5:17 and through Paul's mouth in Romans 10:4. I'm gonna yield there because I'm on E right now. I'm getting tired. I'm hungry, right? So I apologize for that, but I wanted to thoroughly answer that as much as possible so that y'all can take that seed, plant it in your research, and go from there. All right. Shout out to my brother Yemyahu in the building. Israelite for peace. Squeaky clean. Hopefully that answers your question. Why can't you just take the scripture as it is? So you wanted to debate? Did you want to debate this? We're gonna wait until our next live stream. Subscribe to the channel. Come on the next live stream, and we're gonna go. Claiming Paul's a liar or the Bible is mistranslated makes you look crazy. I don't know who he's talking to. Are you talking to me or somebody else in the chat? I have no clue. All right, I'm gonna fall back. Let me give a couple of shout outs. My Lockman Yashavala. You might be talking to somebody in the chat, I guess. Thank you so much for the donation, Get Wise. I appreciate that, my brother. Thank you for your support as always. Hey, no problem. So I'll probably try to start a little later. I'll probably try to start a little later next Friday. Or if you can wait for the Friday after that. So the Friday after that, I think, was that Christmas? I don't know. I don't follow that stuff. But the Friday of Christmas, I'll have a lot more time because my kids are not in school and all of that. I'll have a lot more time. So if you want to wait till then, we could do a whole 3-hour session and just go over a whole bunch of material and information, right? Clubhouse has been fire. And again, we got one of them. We're going to pop on the Patreon later on tonight. All right, let me close on up. Let me close out. Thirsty, I'm hungry, I'm tired. But you know what? I enjoyed this session. We peaked at 110 people in this session, so all praise to the Most High. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. Make sure you share the video so other people can get edified with the information. Lock in with us at KHM. The description is in the details below. If you're just now watching this portion, go back and check out the replays on what we said about KHM. Also sign up for the Patreon. We have Eisodus to African Zion, which is going to be a staple work in our community for us to speak our voice and explain who we are as far as our identity and our lineal descent and the customs and traditions that we have absorbed and is part of our DNA and epigenetically part of our makeup, our behavioral makeup, and how we exemplify what an Israelite is supposed to be today as those of us that's here in the exile in America. This is a monumental work. It's going to take a lot of time to complete, but with your help, we can get it done. I have a sample on there you can check out for yourself, but this is why we got to support Israelite scholarship because nobody else is going to support us. And we have to do it so we can lay down a landmark and pave a path for the generations, the subsequent generations to come behind us and continue to push this work. Because the lost sheep is in academia as well and other affluent positions that they don't identify what you're saying until they can cite it somewhere in academic publishing. And we're here to do that. The KHM portion is taking this information, making it tangible, and creating programs, services, and implementation paradigms to resolve the societal ills in our community. And that will be our initiative, the Covenant Social Reconstruction Model, the CSRM, will be our #1 initiative as KHM going into 2026. And if you want the details on that, check out that paper on the Patreon. All right. Thank you guys for your contributions, your questions, your insights that you shared. I love you all. I appreciate it. Hopefully I gave enough shout outs of everybody who has left something in the chat. Thank you, KB Aded, for the donation. You said, what is the smoking gun that Cornelius is not an Israelite? I'll give that to you, man. I'm trying to go. Let me try to keep this about 2 hours. You donated. I appreciate it. So let me speak on that real briefly. That's very easy to address. And the answer to that is very simply, let me show it to you in the Blue Letter Bible. All right. Let's go to Acts chapter 20. Wow. Acts chapter 10 and verse 28. I'm going to show it to you. And then we out of here. All right. Oh, because you my man, KB. You my man. And you did donate. So I want to make sure your voice is heard. Let me share this with you real quick and I'm going to close out. I promise. No more questions after this, family, please. All right. Again, if you do have questions, you can't ask it on here. Go to the Patreon. There's a free chat, paid chat. Ask your questions over there. We'll answer them. Okay. That's the 24/7, 365 after. Let me go ahead and share this for you. Dead, and we're going to answer this question. Where is it at? Right here. Right. All right. You said, what is the smoking gun? What is the smoking gun? This word right here. This is a smoking gun. Aluphilos. Aluphilos. This word right here means another nation, right? Of one. But what we're gonna hone in for aluphilos, when we go down to aluphilos, right? It says, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. This has nothing to do with an Israelite. How do we know that? When we go into the usage of the word. Let's go into it. And we look at it in the LXX. Here it is right here. View Old Testament results in the LXX Greek concordance. We click in there. What are we going to see? Here we go. Look at this. Look at this, right? Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a whoring after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. Your homework is to look at all these scriptures, right? Namely, 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, of the Sidonians, of the Hivites, from Mount Baal Hermon unto entering into Hamath. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men and with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. When you go into this and you look up this word in the LXX, I would say the majority of its usages is always going to be another individual of another ethnic bloodline other than Israel. These are non-Israelites. The inhabitants of the land were non-Israelites. The Philistine, Canaanites, Sidonians, Hivites were non-Israelites, right? The Philistines, non-Israelites, right? These are all non-Israelites. Ethnically, they're not Israelites. And this is what Peter calls Cornelius. There's no way around this. Even outside of the LXX and the New Testament, when you go into extra biblical texts of Koine Greek that uses the same term, it means the same thing. It's always somebody of another ethnicity other than yourself and those who are related to you by extension or cousins of yours, which means for the southern tribe, those would be the northern tribes. This is always referring to somebody that's outside that lineage. Always. That's the smoking gun. You don't need nothing more than that. When you talk to somebody about this, tell them, well, let's look at this word in the Old Testament, in the LXX, and see who it refers to. Let them absorb that and go like this. Go like this. Go like this. Lean backward and go like that. Let them finish that. And then you serve it to them. Let them eat the rest. All praises. All praise. All right. With that said, thank you, family. I appreciate the support. I think this was an excellent session. Longer than I expected, but a good 2 hours of jam-packed information from start to finish. If you're catching it just now, go back into the replay and check it out from the beginning to now. You're going to enjoy it. I knew this was going to be epic, and I thank the Most High for this time with you all. All right, let me get to my family. Let me get to my meal. Let me get to some water. Let me get to some relaxation. All right, in preparation for the Shabbat that's happening tomorrow from sunrise to sunset. I want to thank you all. Baruch to you all. I pray the Most High will continue to bless you all. His Ruach will reside with you all, that you all will create a sacred space for him to dwell with you, for you to be with him. Go back into the scriptures, read the Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah, pull from it what you can, learn what you can apply, and sign up for the classes so you can understand how to interpret every passage in the scripture for yourselves. www.patreon.com/Divine Prospect. Sign up for the $50 tier and get in class. All right. Thank you for the support, for the prayers, and for the encouragement, family. I love you all. Continue to bless one another. You're each other's keeper. And I will see you on the next live stream or in the 24/7, 365 after party. That is the Patreon. I'll see you again soon. Peace and shalom, family. Shalom.